Secrets. We all have them. Some of them are good secrets. Others are pretty dark.
This is a world that operates completely in the dark.
This is a story about one big secret that's been kept from you for a very long time.
What's outrageous is not what's illegal, but what's legal.
This is where tons of companies are registered. This is the definition of a shell company.
Shell companies are the key tool that criminals use if they want to move their dirty money.
We'll show you how that secret was revealed.
Vast number of confidential documents have been leaked.
How it might just change the way we all see the world.
The Prime Minister stepped down after those protests.
He's looked after his own pocket.
The offshore world is the parallel universe of the ultra-powerful.
You can trace, but you can't stop it. Stop this filming.
Sir?
You don't know that it affects your life, and it affects every single person's life every day.
It all started with an encrypted message.
When I first learned about the leak and saw what is in there, I was surprised, shocked what I saw.
Fred and Bastian are investigative reporters from the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung. About a year ago, they received a data dump from an unknown source.
The data may be 100 times larger than WikiLeaks.
The leak, for the first time, exposed how the super rich and the super sleazy hide their money.
When we received more and more data, it was like, oh, there's another fantastic lead. Oh, there's another head of state. Whoa, and there's this criminal and that criminal. We found dozens of people being on the Forbes 500 list. There was not enough time every day to follow all these leads.
2.6 terabytes. Now, if you can visualize that in paper form, that's about 100 times what you see around me in this room. We estimate that it would take 25 years to read through all the documents.
The biggest collaboration of investigative journalists.
They were overwhelmed, so they turned to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, who rounded up a few hundred more reporters, including us here at Fusion.
You will find them in there as PDFs, TIFFs, or JPEGs.
And who were some of the names we found?
The prime ministers of Iceland and Pakistan, the king of Saudi Arabia, Russia's Vladimir Putin's inner circle, Syria's Bashar al-Assad's family members, close relatives of China's top leader, Xi Jinping, their soccer superstar Lionel Messi, even the father of England's Prime Minister David Cameron. And then there's a parade of lesser-known tax cheats, drug lords, fraudsters, and thieves, and even a pedophile.
The emails, PDFs, spreadsheets all come from Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca.
Mosfon Group is now a world-class organization. What started out as a vision 35 years ago has become a reality.
Set up in the early 80s by Ramon Fonseca and Jürgen Mossack, Mosfon started from humble beginnings.
People basically need us.
But expanded to over 30 countries around the world. Now they're one of 10 similar firms that specialize in helping clients use something called shell companies. It's a common way for criminals and tax evaders to hide money. A shell company is exactly that, a shell. It's an empty, inactive business, kind of like a house with no one living in it. Often, to create extra layers of complexity, people will set up a shell, inside a shell, inside a shell.
Now, don't get me wrong. Shell companies can be perfectly legit. Say your business is looking to expand and try new ideas. You don't want competitors finding out and scooping you. Set up a shell company. Or say you want to protect your assets, or set up a subsidiary overseas. Or maybe even for security reasons. You're scared of being kidnapped for ransom. All good reasons. Sigmundur David Gunnlaugsson was elected Iceland's prime minister in 2013 on a platform of financial reform, cleaning up the country's banks. What he didn't tell anyone was that his wife owned a company that was set up through Mossack Fonseca, and that the company could potentially benefit from the high-level governmental decisions he was making. You got to see what happened when he was asked about it.
Mr. Prime Minister, what can you tell me about a company called Vintris?
Now I'm starting to feel a bit strange about these questions, because it's like you are accusing me of something.
It must be okay for me as a journalist to ask the Prime Minister about personal...
But you are indicating that I have not paid taxes on it.
No, I'm just asking you questions.
Okay.
It must be okay to ask those questions.
James Henry has been studying shell companies for over 30 years.
And how many of these shell companies are there in the world?
Well, I think we're up to somewhere in the north of 20 million. Mossack's total companies that were revealed in this is 214,000 companies. But it really is a global industry with lots and lots of other players like Mossack.
And how much money is being hidden through the shell companies?
Our estimate as Tax Justice Network is that as of 2010, about $21 to $32 trillion of offshore private financial wealth was invested through havens.
Need that again?
About $21 to $32 trillion of offshore private financial wealth was invested through havens.
And one of those havens is Panama. For anyone with money to hide, Panama is in the business of keeping secrets. Dictators, thieves, drug lords, and tax cheats find this tiny nation a safe place to stash their cash.
So we're here at the Panama Canal, the granddaddy of canals. I mean, when you think Panama, you think the canal. Well, in the same way that this canal moves lots of ships and lots of trade, the offshore companies here in Panama move lots and lots of money. This is a visual metaphor.
We timed our stay here to coincide with an offshore investment conference for consultants, lawyers, and Panamanian government officials.
We're going to try to get into this offshore investment conference.
We did try to get media access, but we're told we couldn't get in, even if we paid the $1,500 fee.
I guess right about now.
Since the conference was taking place at our hotel, we figured we'd at least try to find out what was on the agenda.
One of the events that's going to come up today that we're not invited to is blacklists in politics.
I was reading the agenda when this happened.
Then we've got one on...
Stop this filming, please. This is about my event. What's going on here?
We are journalists, and we wanted to come into the event.
Do you want to come down here and talk to me about this? Because
is there a problem with the hallway?
Well, Ross, can you call security for me?
Because we're doing a story on offshore finance. They're calling security. They said they're going to have us removed from the hotel.
Of course, I shouldn't have been surprised. Investigative journalists and secrets don't mix.
Can we get your name on it? Okay, you're the chief executive of offshore. We can Google it.
Your rudeness is dreadful. Please get out of my sight.
Who's being rude?
His name is Barry C. Bingham. He's the director of Offshore Investment Magazine.
I think you're here causing trouble, and I'm not really interested. So if you'd be kind enough to leave me.
All right, well, thank you. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye. Good luck. All the best. All right, well, we were polite. I don't know.
Panama is one of the 50 tax havens in the world, meaning a place that offers super low tax rates, but also financial secrecy. So tiny islands in the Caribbean, to Hong Kong, to Luxembourg, to Switzerland, and even certain states in the U.S.
They thought this is an alternative type of industry apart from tourism. And some of them became successful. Cayman Islands is now touted as having, the 5th largest financial industry in the world, and yet they have so few people. It's a scam.
Mossack Fonseca has built more than just a booming offshore business in Panama. It's become an exporter. Ever heard of the island of Niue? No? Well, it's a speck of an island in the Pacific. Back in 1994, the island government reached out to Mossack Fonseca, requesting help to bring in shell company revenue. According to former regulators, Mossack Fonseca didn't just help. They actually wrote the legislation for the Niuean Parliament. And then they set up shop there, and a new tax haven was born. We've heard there's a firm that registers companies at this one address, thousands of them, so we want to see what that looks like. This is unbelievable. Here we are in Panama, a world-class tourist destination. Beautiful beaches, rainforests, beautiful people, all the glitz, all the glamour, high-rise buildings. This is the picture of progress and development. It's also one of the closest tax havens to the U.S. Billions and billions of dollars pass through here every year, secretly. It's estimated about 40,000 new companies are set up every year in Panama. Financial services make up 7.4% of the country's GDP.
Panama happens to be a place where, shall we say, the hand of regulation is not very heavy.
To set up a shell company, you need to file paperwork with the government, stating the name of the company, the names of the directors, and an address. Mossack Fonseca and other firms do that for you. Often, they'll use the same address for thousands of companies. We've heard there's a firm that registers companies at this one address, thousands of them, so we want to see what that looks like. Our German reporting partners at NDR set up a shell here. They've told us there are at least 6,000 companies listed at the same address. There should be bustling offices full of people. We wanted to see for ourselves. We've been told it's on the 19th floor. This is unbelievable.
There's nothing here, nothing at all. I don't know that we're actually supposed to be in here, but look at this place. I mean, the floor isn't finished, there's no desks, there's no paperwork, there's no people. I don't even think there's any toilet paper in the bathroom.
The German reporter had told us the 19th floor, and that his company was registered to Suite H. It was a tiny office at the end of the empty hall.
Yes, madam, I'm looking for Suite H, because there my company is located.
So this is what a shell company looks like. It's basically a front. There's no real business here.
My phone. I think we gotta go.
Natasha.
Why would someone go to all this effort to set up a company at an empty office all the way in Panama? Taxes, baby. Igor Lenikov is on the Forbes list of the 10 most infamous tax cheats. In 2007, he pled guilty to lying on his tax returns after claiming he owned no foreign companies or accounts. Actually, he was stashing $200 million offshore. After settling with the IRS for $52 million, he avoided jail, then sued his bank, claiming he was duped. We found Igor Lenikov in the Mossack Fonseca files as a shareholder in a company not related to the tax case. Surprise, surprise.
So if you imagine the Star Wars bar scene, you have all kinds of characters who are able to use these same facilities. You have arms dealers, drug dealers, you have tax dodgers, you have kleptocrats, people who are helping themselves to their national treasuries as public officials. So there's this whole cast of characters who are basically around the same facilities, taking advantage of, ultimately, financial secrecy that they buy.
So what role does Mossack Fonseca play in this industry?
They're calling on wealthy people, helping them to avoid taxes and become citizens of nowhere for tax purposes.
Mossack Fonseca adamantly denies that they help launder and hide money. But we found one document in the files that tells a very different story. So here's this email from one of the former partners, a guy named Ramses Owens. It's in Spanish, but if you look what it says, it reads, 95% of our clients come to us to hide their money because they don't want to pay taxes.
Tax dodging by very wealthy people where, they're basically shifting the tax burden onto the middle class and the poor. That's going to be undermining democracy.
Ramses Owens did not respond to our request for comment. Mossack Fonseca stated they strongly disagree with any implications that their primary function is facilitating tax avoidance or evasion. The U.S. Treasury estimates about $150 billion. $150 billion with a B, dollars, is lost every year to offshore tax havens. That's a lot of money. But can you imagine what would happen if everybody in America suddenly had a tax shelter? How would we maintain our roads, schools, and Social Security benefits? You see, tax evasion affects us all.
Llama a la policía, se van de aquí.
When we started researching the Panama Papers, we were surprised by how many world leaders, criminals, and super rich actually had ties to offshore shell companies. So how did they keep it secret for so long?
This is industrial scale, conduit incorporation. This is off-the-shelf companies, backdated companies, companies that were already formed, just kind of a manufacturing process.
Here's how it's done. To create a corporation, you have to list the name of a director of the company. And for a fee, firms like Mossack Fonseca will basically rent you the name of someone to list as director. It's called a nominee director. You're basically paying for someone to pretend to control the company, so your name appears nowhere. All thanks to the nominee director.
Is that surprising to you at all?
No, it's a business. It's basically just, a letterbox company with no real activity. And
so she just signs her name.
And she's just a signature.
It's a very handy tool for narco-traffickers. They use it all the time, says former agent for the DEA, Robert Mazer. He was undercover in a Colombian drug cartel. Mazer asked us to conceal his identity for his personal safety.
What role do shell companies play for drug cartels?
Shell corporations are an integral element. So if you take it out, that hurts the heart of the crime, because money laundering is the veins and the arteries that feed the blood from the criminal acts that keep the beast, the cartel, alive.
Consider Mexican drug lord Rafa Caro Quintero, a Mossack Fonseca client. He used a company to buy real estate in Costa Rica, but his name didn't appear on the paperwork. So it took years for the firm to figure out the company was actually his.
We know all the nominee directors, the queen of offshore, this woman called Leticia Montoya. We learned that she's a simple woman, but if you look into the Panama registry, she's the director of more than 20,000 companies.
From the files, we can see that Mossack Fonseca has 125 nominee directors on the books. And one of them is a woman named Leticia Montoya. So we were a little surprised then when we looked at her salary and we saw that she's paid $900 a month.
If you want a little perspective, businessman Bill Gates is a director of only 2 companies, and Warren Buffett a total of 7. What could the life of a director of 20,000 companies be like? We wanted to find out.
We're on our way to Vacamonte. It's about 30 minutes outside of the capital. We're going to visit Leticia Montoya. She's an employee at Mossack Fonseca.
4M.
Yeah.
Está bien, ¿no?
Está bien.
Okay, so here we go. We're gonna go to Leticia's house. It's right over here. There's somebody sweeping outside, so maybe it's Leticia. ¿Qué tal? I think that's her husband. He just walked away. Señor, una pregunta. Señor, ¿está Leticia? Pero...
Llama a la policía, se van de aquí.
Pero...
Se van.
Pero solo queremos hacerle una pregunta. I think that's a pretty clear indication that they want us to leave. I just don't understand why. I mean, if everything's above board, why wouldn't they want to talk to us?
We had no luck, But our French TV partners were able to track Miss Montoya down at 5 a.m. one day on her way into work.
What does she do for a living?
This woman denied being Montoya, but we verified from a copy of her passport it was in fact her. Here's where the nominee director system gets really suspicious. At least 6 of Montoya's companies have been involved in international money laundering and corruption cases. She's listed as the director of a company involved in one of the biggest corruption scandals in Brazil's recent history, and another company at the center of corruption allegations against the former Argentine president, Cristina Kirchner. And what does she get for all her effort? Even though Leticia's only a tool for the firm, the regulators say they're more likely to prosecute her than her bosses.
I wrote this book to help empower women, and that starts with taking control of your finances.
Meet American business guru Mariana Olszewski.
Use cash for everything, whether it's a latte or a purse, or if you're buying a big purchase like a refrigerator.
During the 2008 financial crisis, Olszewski wanted to withdraw $1.8 million she had in a fund through secret shell companies. The problem was, the bank wouldn't release the money without knowing who was getting the cash, and Olszewski didn't want her name revealed. So she reached out to Mossack Fonseca. It's there in the Panama Papers.
And here you see her writing asking for help and the response from Mossack Fonseca in January 2009. So they wrote,
"We may use a natural person who will act as the beneficial owner, and therefore his name will be disclosed to the bank. Since this is a very sensitive matter, fees are quite high."
She replied,
"I do think we should go ahead with the natural person. However, I want to have your promise that you will handle this in the most sensitive manner."
And if we look through deeper, we see that Mossack Fonseca gave her the price breakdown for this little service.
The normal fees are $15,000 a year, but $30,000 for the first year. Mossack Fonseca has denied all claims of assisting Ms. Olszewski in not disclosing her identity to the bank.
"We do not provide beneficiary services to deceive banks. It is difficult, not to say impossible, not to provide the banks with the identity of final beneficiaries and the origin of funds."
The ICIJ and partners tried numerous times to get in touch with Mariana Olszewski, and she didn't respond to any of our requests. You've got anything to hide, this is the perfect place to open up a business.
The biggest leak of financial information in history.
The Panama Papers reveal just how easy it is to hide money in secret offshore companies. But if you think Panama is the only sunny place for shady business, I'd like to welcome you to Miami.
If you're a corrupt dictator and you're stealing money from your country, you want to hide it somewhere else in case you lose power or to spend it on fancy property in, New York, Miami.
Here you can hide money in plain sight, in real estate. There's no shortage of crooks and cartel kingpins who've bought property in Miami. Some call it a stash pad. And local real estate expert Peter Zalewski agreed to give us a tour of some of these places. His company, Condo Vultures, feeds off of them.
Let's get in the boat. I feel like I'm in a P. Diddy video. Is there wine and cheese on this boat tour?
How much of this real estate was bought by foreign investors using entities like LLCs?
I would probably venture to guess at least 60% would be bought with LLCs or corporations rather than buying as an individual.
All right, so now this is the house that was owned by the Cohen father-son?
That's right. That's
Developer,
right.
They were developers, right?
They owned hotels. They were developers.
Okay. And what happened? I mean, this is abandoned now.
Well, ultimately what happened is the federal government got involved and the IRS got involved. This group had $150 million that they hid from the IRS and from the U.S. government and $49 million in income.
They were buying all these properties using shell companies, right?
That's right.
And in their case, they were just clearly trying to hide how much money they were making so they wouldn't have to pay taxes. I mean, this was like major tax evasion.
And that's ultimately what the federal court system determined.
So you get away with it until you don't.
Mauricio Cohen-Asser told us he and his son are innocent. Leon Cohen-Levy didn't respond to our calls. And here's a fun fact. They were clients of Mossack Fonseca. Next up, St. Regis Bell Harbor. More than 70% of the condos here are owned by corporations, LLCs, shell companies, or trusts. According to the Panama Papers investigation, one is controlled by the former governor of Brasilia, Paulo Octavio Pereira, who was accused of bribery and corruption. Pereira denies those accusations. He says his real estate broker recommended he buy the apartment with an LLC. We've discovered 18 foreign nationals created shell companies through Mossack Fonseca and bought property right here in Miami. 8 of those 18 have been accused of tax evasion or corruption in their home countries.
But it's not just Miami. The dirty little secret is that the U.S. is the 3rd largest tax haven in the world.
There are some U.S. options in Delaware, so you don't have to go all the way to Panama.
Nevada.
And that's a disturbing thing. The domestic havens now have 13 states that are just as good as the worst offenders in the world system.
Did you get that? Listen again.
Just as good as the worst offenders in the world system.
13 states that are tax havens right here in the U.S. One of the biggest is one of the smallest states.
Delaware. We're here because this state is famous for business registration. This is where people like to come to register their businesses because it's quick, it's cheap, it's easy, and they offer tons of privacy. So if you've got anything to hide, this is the perfect place to open up a business.
Each year, about 170,000 companies are registered here. So we decided it was time to try it out ourselves. We did a Google search for registered agents and found Advantage Delaware.
Hello. Natasha?
Hi, how are you?
I'm Nancy Wolf. Pleased to meet you. And this
Pleased
is
to meet you.
Advantage Delaware. This is my husband, Steve Wolf.
Oh. Hey, Steve, how are you? I'm Natasha Del Toro. I've never done this before. I'd like to set up this company for my cat. I have a cat named Suki. Actually, I have a photo of her right here. I'm wanting to, that's...
Oh, she's adorable.
Isn't she cute?
Yes.
So the company I'd like to set up is called She Sells Seashells, LLC.
A very catchy name.
Let me hear you say it.
She Sells Seashells, LLC. Didn't know there'd be a test.
No, I did not.
What am I going to need then to set up this company?
Actually, it's pretty easy. You don't need any documents. You pay for our service, and we go ahead and form the entity.
I don't need to show you my license or my passport or even my cat's, but, you know.
Oh, the picture was lovely. We enjoyed it.
Do I have to have my name on the forms?
Your name is nowhere.
Delaware has a certain privacy policy. They don't keep record of members of LLCs.
If you had a drug dealer, somebody doing illicit things, would you all be responsible at all, like in terms of not registering them at that point?
We would not know.
We would not know. I mean, law enforcement can issue us a subpoena and we would have to respond, yes.
So I'm just writing my name, address.
Okay, that's good.
Cell phone.
$249 it is. Okay, let's do this.
Let's do this. So this is it. So this is all I needed to form my business entity. So this is my business. I just created a business called She Sells Seashells, LLC. And it took like 5 minutes.
Just to be clear, these folks didn't do anything illegal. They're just following the laws of the state they live in.
There are some states that make a lot of money off of incorporation and specifically marketing shell companies to people around the world.
Our reporter, Catherine Dunn, talked to Delaware's Deputy Secretary of State.
Do you know how much revenue is generated on an annual basis by state incorporations and related fees?
Delaware, yes, $1.2 billion.
A year?
Yes.
As for making sure that sleazy people aren't setting up companies to hide illegal activities, Geisenberger says, not his job. The Fed should do that.
I don't frankly know what is a legitimate driver's license. I mean, I know what the Delaware license looks like, but I frankly don't know what the other 49 driver's licenses look like. I don't know what a passport from Nigeria looks like.
You don't want to live in a country in which people of means can hide all their assets and protect themselves against criminal behavior, so there's only the rule of law for the rest of us. You don't want to live in that place.
Wants an example? Ever heard of a guy named Victor Bout? He's an arms dealer from Russia who sold weapons to the Taliban. Guess where he hid his money? Florida, Delaware, and Texas. In 12 shell companies. For years, authorities couldn't find him. Every time they tried to link Bout to the companies, they hit a dead end. Eventually, Bout was caught, but only after an undercover sting in Bangkok.
States form these corporations without asking who's behind them. Delaware, Wyoming, Nevada, they've all been shown to form corporations that are involved in wrongdoing, and yet when law enforcement is trying to find out who's behind that wrongdoing, they don't have the information.
Wyoming and Delaware have tightened their laws somewhat. A registered agent now must keep a record of a contact person for the companies. And top financial regulators in the U.S. have taken steps to increase transparency in real estate deals in Miami and New York. Authorities reached out to Mossack Fonseca.
Andrew Mogliansky arranged to have 3 young girls, ages 13 and 14, delivered to that apartment and engaged in sexual activity with them.
I might not always be able to filter out a criminal element.
Having helped create 200,000 companies, Mossack Fonseca has struggled to keep track of their clients.
Investigators say the suburban multimillionaire is a child predator.
The defendant went halfway around the world to find perhaps the weakest population of victims.
Alleged sex trafficker Andrew Mogliansky was one of them.
Prosecutors say the alleged sex acts took place between December 2003 and January 2004.
Andrew Mogliansky traveled to an apartment he owned in St. Petersburg, Russia, and arranged to have 3 young girls, ages 13 and 14, delivered to that apartment from a nearby orphanage and engaged in sexual activity with them there.
He molested them as a way of introducing them to his child prostitution business.
Mogliansky was sent to jail for 8 years in 2009 for traveling to have sex with minors. That same year, authorities reached out to Mossack Fonseca asking for information on Mogliansky and the companies he set up through the firm.
That's when they discovered they had no information about the beneficial owner. They had no ID, they had no passport. Eventually, they found an expired Philadelphia driver's license. They also found out that Mogliansky was allegedly involved in a sex trafficking ring.
Nevertheless, they decided to keep him on. According to the documents as of 2015, Mossack Fonseca was still acting as Andrew Mogliansky's registered agent.
There's something called willful blindness. It takes someone a lot of effort to ignore the facts that are in front of you, right?
Mogliansky was not convicted of sex trafficking and denies any claims he was involved in the prostitution ring Veronica, or that he used his companies through Mossack Fonseca for illicit purposes.
There's compliance and then there's compliance. By that I mean everybody's required to have a compliance officer. Everybody's required to do some kind of due diligence. The question is, how real is it?
Mossack Fonseca are required to carry out background checks on clients they suspect might be controversial. But Ramon Fonseca recently told Panamanian TV that his firm isn't responsible for what their clients do with their companies.
Es como si, por ejemplo, yo soy una fábrica de automóviles. Yo hago un automóvil, se lo vendo a una agencia, que es el abogado. El abogado lo revende a un cliente. El cliente va y mata a una persona. ¿Es la fábrica que hizo el automóvil responsable de la muerte de esa persona? No.
What's the role of some of the law firms and the incorporators?
If they know the source of the funds, and they do anything to conceal or disguise, I think arguably they are as responsible for the criminal acts of their clients as their clients are.
They're the facilitators of this whole business. And they like to think all they do is follow instructions and they're not really evil. But almost everybody I've ever encountered who is criminal believes that all they're doing is what everybody else is doing.
Okay, this is where I live. My little workstation, I sell a few books on the internet. This one is unacceptable.
John Krim used Mossack Fonseca to help create companies. He lived a much more glamorous life in Malta, working with over 1,400 clients all over the world.
I have some invoice packing slip.
Krim says he didn't know what his clients were doing with their companies.
Put this in storage. I would only know it as far as the name that goes in that form. But I didn't know those people. I'd never meet those people. And that's what I liked, not having to meet people. There is a chance that I might not always be able to filter out a criminal element.
Obviously not, because 10 years ago, the IRS caught up with him.
It was either 23 or 28 customers that chose to abuse the system. They were audited or charged criminally.
Krim was convicted of tax fraud. He was thrown in jail for 8 years and ordered to pay $17.2 million in restitution. He still says he did nothing wrong.
The one who created the corporation, unless they were part of the business plan, they're not responsible for what a client does with it. And I don't know of any law that says I can't create a corporation on paper.
But while agents, lawyers, and politicians point fingers at each other, the consequences of such scarce oversight can be fatal. For years, the Syrian Air Force has bombed its own people. These air attacks would not have been possible, say U.S. authorities, without a network of secret companies supplying the fuel that kept the aircrafts in the sky.
The lack of transparency enables those organizations to operate. Because if you can't pay your soldiers, if you can't get your supplies, you can't fight a war.
Governments, including the UK and US, have banned business with these companies. But the Panama Papers reveal that Mossack Fonseca helped them operate in the dark, even after the bans were imposed. We found 32 more sanctioned companies and people in the Panama Papers.
What is at stake here?
I hate to tell you this, but there is a large segment of people within the international banking community, legal community, financial services community, that are resources every day to criminal organizations.
People who are drug czars, people who are terrorists, people who have bribe money that they're using can hide behind the corporate veil.
But the net effect is that the services that they provide enables those clients of theirs to commit crimes that cause a lot of suffering to a lot of other people.
Mossack Fonseca denies knowingly assisting the sanctioned companies.
We have never knowingly allowed the use of our companies by individuals having any relationship with North Korea, Zimbabwe, Syria, and other countries mentioned.
Oh my God, there's someone going in. Dude, he has a gun. We're going to the firm. Mira, mira, somebody's coming.
Was anyone going to hold Mossack Fonseca accountable for doing business with drug dealers and dictators? We decided we needed some answers. Dear Mr. Sosa, I'm a journalist at Fusion, and we have some questions we would like to ask you about Mossack Fonseca and would like to interview you. We've given them a deadline to get back to us, and if they don't answer, we're gonna pay them a visit. That same day, we decided to pay Jürgen Mossack a visit to his home.
Oh my God, there's someone going in. Dude, he has a gun, so, you know, we're gonna be a little... Okay. ¿Podemos hablar con el señor Mossack?
Él no está.
No está. ¿Con quién acaba de entrar? Who was it? He said it was not him. Señor, queremos saber si vive aquí el señor Mossack. ¿Es aquí?
There's some guy there.
It's a guy. Can we ask you a few questions? Señor! This is where Jürgen Mossack lives, is a big modern house. And the security guard, he's not coming over here. Let's get out of here. Keep an eye on that guard. I think that they probably have security cameras and they're watching to see, especially right now. So now we're going to go to Mossack Fonseca. We're going to meet up with 7 other crews there, international journalists, because, you know, with a bigger group of people, there'll be more chances that they'll actually come out and talk to us. Or maybe they just stay inside
and wait till we're gone.
So let's do it quickly. This is our crew. We're going to the firm to do our confrontation. It's just up the street on the left-hand side. So we've got people from France, we've got people from Denmark, Argentina, Australia, Germany. Gerardo Reyes, a very well-known international journalist, he's been the designated spokesperson for the group. He's going to go up to the security guard and ask him if we can talk to one of the execs from the firm. This isn't conspicuous at all, right? We just have about 15 people, 20 people here with cameras. Here we go.
No puede entrar.
Queremos hablar con la gente de Mossack Fonseca.
No, no se puede.
¿Por qué no se puede?
Si tienen cita, sí, si no, no.
I guess the big question is, do they have any responsibility for the kinds of clients they work with?
¿Cómo? ¿Pero quién le dijo a usted que no nos van a atender? Pero ¿quién le dijo que no nos va a atender?
They are saying that nobody's going to talk to us.
Thank you. Mossack Fonseca fact sheet.
This is their response. Basically, this is just denying everything. We're not really happy with it. We'd like to talk to somebody. Mira, mira, somebody's coming. Oh, this is Carlos Sosa. He's the PR guy. He's finally here to talk to us.
Nosotros no lavamos dinero, no aceptamos dinero, no tomamos dinero, y eso es lo único que les puedo decir. Muchas gracias por su tiempo y seguimos en contacto a través del correo.
The day after we confronted Mossack Fonseca, Ramon Fonseca stepped down from his leadership role in the ruling party, as well as his position as a presidential advisor.
Estoy pidiéndole al señor presidente una licencia para salir a defender mi nombre, mi firma y mi país.
On April 12, 2016, police raided the Mossack Fonseca headquarters in Panama City.
We wish for more transparency in the world, and I think that we did a little step to help there.
While the Panama Papers leak was massive, the truth is, it actually only opens a very small window into the secret world of hidden money. You see, Mossack Fonseca is just one law firm. There are about 10 more big companies just like it, all working round the clock to keep secrets hidden.
Public officials, lawyers, and bankers who are engaged in facilitating this stuff have to pay a price for it. You know, not just fines, but they should do some jail time.
If this stuff is understood by the public, if people realized how important the issues are, the system would fall apart.
Tongue. About a year ago, they received a data dump from an unknown source.
The data may be 100 times larger than WikiLeaks.
The leak, for the first time, exposed how the super rich and the super sleazy hide their money.
When we received more and more data, it was like, oh, there's another fantastic lead. Oh, there's another head of state. Whoa, and there's this criminal and that criminal. We found dozens of people being on the Forbes 500 list. There was not enough time every day to follow all these leads.
2.6 terabytes. Now, if you can visualize that in paper form, that's about 100 times what you see.
Secrets. We all have them. Some of them are good secrets. Others are pretty dark.
This is a world that operates completely in the dark.
This is a story about one big secret that's been kept from you for a very long time.
What's outrageous is not what's illegal, but what's legal.
This is where a ton
tons of companies are registered. This is the definition of a shell company.
Shell companies are the key tool that criminals use if they want to move their dirty money.
We'll show you how that secret was revealed.
Vast number of confidential documents have been leaked.
How it might just change the way we all see the world.
The Prime Minister stepped down.
Around me in this room. We estimate that it would take 25 years to read through all the documents.
The biggest collaboration of investigative journalists.
They were overwhelmed, so they turned to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, who rounded up a few hundred more reporters, including us here at Fusion.
You will find them in there as PDFs, GIFs, or JPEGs.
And who were some of the names we found?
The prime ministers of Iceland and Pakistan, the king of Saudi Arabia, Russia's Vladimir Putin's inner circle, Syria's Bashar al-Assad's family members, close relatives of China's top leader, Xi Jinping, their soccer superstar Lionel Messi, even the father of England's Prime Minister David Cameron. And then there's a parade of lesser-known tax cheats, drug lords, fraudsters, and thieves.
After those protests,
he's looked after his own pocket.
The offshore world is the parallel universe of the ultra-powerful.
You can trace, but you can't stop it.
Stop this filming.
Sir?
You don't know that it affects your life, and it affects every single person's life every day.
It all started with an encrypted message.
When I first learned about the leak and saw what is in there, I was surprised, shocked what I saw.
Fred and Bastian are investigative reporters from the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung.
And even a pedophile.
The emails, PDFs, spreadsheets all come from Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca.
Mosfon Group is now a world-class organization. What started out as a vision 35 years ago has become a reality.
Set up in the early 80s by Ramon Fonseca and Jürgen Mossack, Mosfon started from humble beginnings.
People basically need us.
But expanded to over 30 countries around the world. Now they're one of 10 similar firms that specialize in helping clients use something called shell companies. It's a common way for criminals and tax evaders to hide money. A shell company is exactly that, a shell. It's an empty, inactive business, kind of like a house